everybody. I'm Larry Roberts.
And I'm Sara Losi, and this is Branded, your comprehensive guide to creative branding.
And on this, what should be a very, very fun episode of the podcast, we have someone that Sara has just been a huge fan of since she was a wee little lady. So it's awesome to have him here. His name is Will Greenblatt. And Will is, he's a recovering child actor. Will started acting at the age of 7 years old, starring in The Homecoming with Oscar winner Anne Bancroft. He graduated from theater school in 2010, but hated being a working adult actor, so he quit. He moved to Spain to teach English before co-founding an education company in China. Man, he's all over the world. He used his background in acting, teaching, and entrepreneurship to co-found OutLoud Speaker School, which, based on my reading of this bio, I could probably attend. It's an agency of actors teaching public speaking skills to entrepreneurs and executives. And with that, Will, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love doing these, and I'm excited to be with you guys.
Super
more
cool.
importantly, he was Sheldon on Life with Derek on Disney Channel.
Claim to fame.
I got to be honest. I mean, I'm in a totally different demographic here. So I'm 52. So I'm not even familiar with the show. And I think, honestly, my kids were too old to be familiar with the show. That's how.
No, your kids are like my age.
My youngest is older than you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I think it's like a later millennial. It was like a later millennial kind of thing. Like people my age were a bit too old for it, I feel like, but the younger millennials were seemed to be into it.
What was it? It was like 2010, I think, or like something.
Oh yeah, even before that. The two seasons I was on, I think, were in 2008, 2009, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone doesn't know what Life with Derek is.
Even before that, it was like mid 2000s. Because
I think it was like 2006.
They wrote me out of the show by saying my character was going to go move out east to go to school, because that's what actually was happening for me. I went to Halifax. I did a year of university. So they wrote me out. They sent my character to Newfoundland as a little like shout out to the Maritimes. But yeah, that was mid 2000s. I was a much more handsome person and less tired looking all the time.
I can relate. I can relate.
Yeah.
We literally got Will on the show because I messaged him on LinkedIn because I have had burning questions about Life with Derek for the past, that would be now 10 years. Because if anyone has seen that show, you know that is the show about two step siblings with just really uncomfortable, palpable sexual tension.
Yeah, it's sort of like a precursor to all the trends in pornography that people seem to be going on.
Hold on. I got to put myself on blast here because as an early teen, I found out I had a stepsister from my stepdad.
Oh God, I don't think we want to have this on the show.
No. It didn't go. We didn't get all Jerry Springer, but we were both just hitting that whole puberty stage of life, and we were spending a little too much time playing house and this and that, and she didn't live with us for very long, so nothing ever happened. I swear, nothing ever happened. But that whole thing there was
space.
I'm just saying it could happen. So there goes all my followers.
Get the authorities involved.
Clients are dropping.
You're on a
right
list
now.
somewhere now. Terrible.
The weird. So I'm gonna out my wife, although I think she's probably fine with this. She and her friends have a book club, and they read a lot of romances, and and so there's always these weird things in the romances with step siblings.
Yeah.
Like it's constant that there's this thing, and I'm just like, why is this such a big thing? And I personally do not get it. But
I didn't get it either. I didn't understand it. Totally. I didn't get. Yeah.
Did you guys meet because she slid in your DMs hoping to be introduced to Derek?
Absolutely not. Although that probably has happened more times than I can even remember. But I never get really people sliding into my DMs. It sounds like such a cool thing to happen. I've always heard of it happening, and it doesn't happen to me. I don't get the sliding in the DMs.
Don't feel bad, bro. I'm not even a pseudo celebrity, and
I would love that. I would love someone to slide into my DM. Everybody just barges into my DMs with something to sell me. Yeah, nobody
Um,
slides in like, hey,
I
what's
feel
up?
like I kind of slid,
You
not
did.
in a
You
like
slid.
hitting on way, which is
That
how
was smooth.
usually they are. But
Yours was really smooth. I have to say.
I,
But no,
I think my opener was like super interested in what you're doing now, totally. But can we talk about life with
let's talk
Derek
about
circa
that.
2006?
And that's awesome because honestly, like on LinkedIn, when somebody comes as a human being, that's my favorite. I hate when somebody's just like, hey, I love what you're doing and I'm looking to expand my circle with other interesting members and gain insights. I'm just like, okay, what do you have to sell me? Tell me about it. And probably the answer
Pitch
is
slap.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
I don't even acknowledge them.
yeah, and I usually just ignore those. But I love the way that you slid. So I would say, Sarah, you're one of my first actual slidings. Yeah, it was lovely. But no, I met my wife on Tinder. Modern love story.
Oh wow, on
Even
Tinder.
better.
Well, because she didn't know anything about who I was. Not that like anybody does, but although like there once in a while when I was in the dating scene, some people would recognize me, but not very often. But we matched because we liked each other's vibe, and I almost blew it because I had an old iPhone that would double and triple send messages. So I'd be like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then my phone would go, "Hey, how's it going?" Hey, how's it going? And send her like 3 of the same messages. So she thought I was a serial killer. And she really did not want to talk to me at first. And then finally we got through that part. But yeah, we were an algorithm match.
That's too funny, man.
Yeah.
I've got a couple, they're friends of mine that they met on Match, like way back when Match first was out, like when internet dating was new and really it was just a hookup platform, I mean, it was kind of scary, and we used to make fun of him, but man, they've been married now for, man, I'll say 25 years.
Yeah.
It was way back. I mean, maybe it wasn't Match. I don't even know if Match was around 25 years ago, but they've been married 20 plus years, and it was one of the first ones. So,
yeah.
But
hey,
it's great. I mean,
it's compatible. It doesn't matter how and where you meet. Some people
100%.
meet at bars, some people meet at work, some people meet in a pumpkin patch. I don't know. You've seen movies. I don't know what it is.
It just happens.
Yeah,
little hearts pop up and everything's good. So, well, hey, man, while this is a very fun conversation, we typically talk about branding on the Branded podcast,
yes,
and
let's do it.
And something that you've done is build a tremendous brand, right? And not only were you a successful child actor, but you're an amazing public speaker. You've spoke at like Google and Wayfair and Remax and Boston Dynamics. I mean, all these massive, massive companies, and you've helped your clients win $350 million in investments, and you won deals on Dragon's Den, which, if you don't know what Dragon's Den, isn't that the Australian version of Shark Tank?
Canadian. Well, yeah,
Canadian.
British, Canadian, probably Australian too. I think everywhere outside the States calls it Dragon's Den, but.
Gotcha. So, but for those of you that aren't familiar with Dragon's Den, it's very, very similar to Shark Tank. Basically the exact same thing, as a matter of fact. But man, and you're a recording musician, you do all kinds of stuff. So talk to us a little bit about how did the child acting play a role in building such a well-established and successful brand, or did you really leave all that behind and focus on entrepreneurship to find where you're at today?
Yeah, I would say probably the second part of your question is the answer, more than the acting helping me build a brand. I have friends who have built brands through acting, and that's because they're on shows that people watch, and then they get the fans come from the show to their Instagram or whatever it is. I never really had that. I kind of built my brand by posting videos and written content on LinkedIn, and that's how I was able to get all these opportunities.
Gotcha.
So for me, but I think that the acting background and the theater school training that I was lucky enough to get helped me understand how to tell a story and obviously how to speak. So I've always understood that people connect to stories and personal stories. And I've always been the type of person who's understood that if you can make a connection with somebody, it's much more likely that you can work with them and that people work with who they like. So I kind of knew that from acting, even as a kid. I would walk into an audition room and I know if I can get them to like me, I'm going to get the part, even if I'm not, whatever, the best actor or something. I had that sense, even as a 7-year-old kid, likability is currency. Then as I grew up, I realized this is also keeping me at a bit of a distance with people because I'm performing to be liked. I'm not being real with people. I'm good at that. I can get people to like me, but I'm not connecting with people because I'm not being who I truly am. And then my close friends would kind of notice that, and they would see me like saying one thing to one person and being different in different situations. They would call me out and I would get embarrassed. I would deny it. But I really felt after a while, like, I don't know who I am. Like, I'm just kind of this, weird shapeshifter. So I think I started taking that seriously a few years ago and like going to therapy and trying to be better with myself and who I am and parts of myself that I didn't like. And now I've realized that if I can take that likability skill that I got from being an actor, but infuse it with a desire to be real and to allow people to not like me if I'm not their cup of tea and to be more true to myself, then not only can I be more successful in business, but I can actually just sleep better at night and I can actually feel better about what I'm doing in the world. So like, to me, that's why I say recovering child actor, because being a child actor was great, but it was this fake, weird, performative thing that I didn't want to fully embody anymore. So I was like, okay, I've got to find who I am and stop performing so much. So I feel like now I have the best of both worlds, where I have that skill set, but I just try to, when I speak on stage, when I try to write on LinkedIn and connect with you guys, like I'm trying to, like, what do I really want to say? How do I really want to say it? Not in a way that's going to make me look good, but that's real and true.
Larry, okay, did you think what I was thinking when he was talking? How I think it was Podfest like 2 or 3 years ago, when you took off your red hat. It was just you and me, and it actually, I could like see the difference. Like you were taking off like this whole persona,
right?
Yeah,
because that was like your own. It's not even acting, because it is you, but it was just you in that situation.
It's a different mode, I don't know that I wouldn't call it acting, because I'm very sincere when I'm engaging with people at Podfest and other conferences, and but at the same time, it is a different, it's a different mode, I guess. It's like a switch flips, and I'm the red hat guy, but then I take the red hat off and I'm Larry, and it's something that I've always struggled with and even continue to struggle with today. As of late, our podcasts haven't been as dynamic, because even when the red hat was on, I was still kind of Larry, and Larry's going through some things in life right now that aren't a lot of fun. And so I was just kind of kicking rocks, and you can see that dynamic on the show. Now today, I'm feeling pretty good. So I'm feeling red hat guyish, but I also have to go make an appearance after this at a luncheon where I'm speaking. So I've got to get that energy going, and I've got to get involved in who the red hat guy really is. And so I can relate to exactly what you're saying, but I struggle with the authenticity aspect of it too.
Can I ask you a question? I know I'm not the host, but I'm just super curious about.
Sure.
Is that
I mean, it's a conversation. Okay. Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah. So because I relate so much to what you just said about like when I'm not feeling good in my private life, and then I have to go be on stage or lead a workshop or do a keynote or something like that,
Yeah.
But so do you feel like if you were to integrate what's going on in your personal life, like maybe not necessarily talk about it, but just like somehow find a way to like acknowledge that to the audience that you were going through it, would that feel like you were letting them down to you?
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, there's a persona of success that surrounds the red hat guy. And if I was to share what's going on, that's an extreme failure. So yeah, I think it would shatter that perception.
I'm gonna
even
correct
to
that.
say that on the podcast right now.
I'm gonna correct that it's not an extreme failure, but in your brain it feels like an extreme failure. Just gonna correct
maybe.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you. But yeah, it's tough to reconcile. And, I think you hit the nail on the head. You mentioned that you went to therapy, and I think I'm going to have to take that same route to get back to where we need to be.
Yeah. And I mean, they're obviously, I think we're way past this in our culture, luckily, but there's no shame in it. And it's one of the best things you can do, even as a business person. Even if you don't care about healing for your family and your friends, it's like, as a business person, being not so hard on yourself, getting perspective, learning to like be okay with your flaws but work on them, all the stuff that you are, that one is able to do if you have a good therapist and you have the open mind. It's amazing as an entrepreneur and as a business owner to have that kind of space to go every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. I go every month now, but I wish I could do more. It's just fucking expensive.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. So, but yeah, it's interesting that there's parallels that we share here in that realization.
And not to flip the switch on you and treat this like a therapy session. I just love this stuff. I'm super interested in all these kind of things, especially this idea of personas and masks or all these things that we wear. So that's why I asked the question. I appreciate you answering and letting
and I think it's important to have that conversation because so many people, and I did it until I found the red hat, they come up with these brands or these personas and they strictly are masks. And, I realized along the pathway that those were masks because why? They didn't work. Mm-hmm. I probably had a dozen brands before becoming the red hat guy, and none of those worked because they were forced. They were something. I went out to the creative market on creativemarket.com. I found a logo, and I'm like, oh, that's my brand, and that's not your brand because you have no relation to that inanimate logo that you found on some decent website. But
it's got to come from inside. It has to. And so for me, it's all about your story. So when you're asking about the acting thing, story is everything. It's everything. It's how we process the world. So you can't. The next book I'm working on, I think I'm going to call it Story First, because it's this mindset of like how you approach relationships, how you approach public speaking, how you approach business, how you approach content creation. Everything has to start with understanding what story you're telling and what stories other people have in their heads. And so until you really acknowledge the raw undercurrent of story that's happening throughout the world, you're not going to be able to reach people and connect with them properly. So when it comes to a brand, it's like I knew that if I tried to build a brand on something that wasn't true from my story, of course, it's not going to work. And so I had to say, well, what is my story? I was an actor. And then the big part of my story that I only started feeling comfortable sharing a couple of years ago was that when I was a teenager, my brother passed away. And I did not want to share that because it felt cheap or exploitative for a while. Like I was like, I don't want to share this to get like pity points or sympathy points. Like for money, because I'm out here. I mean, I'm on social media to build a business. I'm not just sharing my thoughts. I'm out here intentionally because I need to find customers to sell my shit to. Like this is a very business oriented operation. So if I'm sharing that story or if I'm sharing it in my workshops where I'm getting paid to be there, is that shitty in some way? So I really struggled with that. And then one day,
dude, we're so similar. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but man, I did the exact same thing because in 2013 I went into rehab for alcohol, and I did not want to share that story because I mean, who hasn't heard the rehab story? It's the same story, just with a different presenter. And I did the exact same thing, and you hit me when you said pity points, because I used to use the term pity porn. Because I looked at it as sharing that story, and it's just me just loving the pity porn, because I used to love sitting there listening to Pink Floyd and wallowing in self-pity, and I considered that pity porn. But eventually, well, I haven't listened to Pink Floyd during all of this. Well, maybe once, maybe when it first started happening, I think I listened to Pink Floyd one night, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not listening to Pink Floyd today. But I was working on getting a TED Talk or a TEDx talk. And I was working with a company that I paid a significant sum to help me land this talk. And the first session was a 2-day session, and we write the outline of our talk. And it was all about getting out of the shadow of pity porn. I'm not saying I was framing it right. That's why I hired a company to help me. So it might not have been the best premise, but I could tell that I wasn't getting a lot of attention the first day. Then the second day, it was even worse. And then finally, about halfway through the second day, one of the instructors goes, "What did you say?" I said, "Pity porn." She goes, "Oh my God, this whole time, I thought you were saying kitty porn." So I'm like, "Oh, did you not read the outline? Did you really not read it? Because it's there the whole time." But yeah, they thought I was a pedophile, and they weren't giving me a lot of attention.
I can see the fact that they were just quiet and not reporting you to the authorities, I think speaks more to their character than
probably. Yes.
I never even thought of that because I've heard the story so many times. I didn't even think of like you could have been on an FBI list so fast.
That is wild. And they just weren't saying anything.
They just weren't saying anything. Yeah.
Oh,
And she
that
goes,
is
"Oh my
weird.
God, this whole time I thought you were saying kitty porn." And I'm like, "Oh." And so I stopped using that term. But
Yeah.
but I that just
It's
goes
a
back to
good
what I was
move.
saying. Yeah, he's a real good move. Is that I relate to what you're saying there and not wanting to tell that story because I
Yeah.
was the exact same way. And I mean, I still am to a certain degree.
Well,
Now,
what?
with what
Yeah.
you're
Sorry.
saying though, with like not wanting to talk about it and it feeling exploitative, like kind of in the same way, I feel like there are a lot of people who do tell those personal stories exactly in that way, that they are like, it does
Yes.
feel like they are trying to capitalize on some traumatic story, and a lot of times it has to do with somebody else, and it does feel exploitative.
Yeah.
Can you kind of talk about how you found that balance and how you found the way to share it in a way that was genuine and wasn't like giving you that like dirty feeling?
To me, it was a question of impetus. Like, why am I doing this? And I had to wait until the impetus was right. And the impetus was, I am lying by omission by not including this in my story. So my story used to be, I was a child actor. I grew up in doing movies and TV shows, and I thought I was going to be an actor. And then I went to theater school, and I didn't like it. So I quit acting. But the reason I didn't like it was because 2 years before going, my brother had died, and I was in deep, deep grief and unprocessed, completely unprocessed, just being numbed by drinking too much and smoking too much weed, and then starting to do cocaine and MDMA. And I was not in a good place.
Damn.
Had that not happened to me, I may have had a very different experience there. I might be an actor to this day. And so I was on a webinar during COVID, and I was telling my story, which I'd done a million times, and I would always tell it the same way. I was an actor. I grew up acting, thought I was going to be an actor, went to theater school, hated it. I used to show this little crying face emoji on my slide deck. I'd show a picture of my face from theater school, and then I would say, and I hated it. And then I'd click, and then a crying face emoji would cover my face, and people go, ah. It was this like cute little thing. But it's not the real story. And the other thing is, the more I started getting into the power of story and how important it is sharing these stories, I realized, like, you don't tell your story. It's not for you. It's for other people. And so when I said that story, I was like, I'm sick of not telling the real story, so I'm just going to tell it. And something happened in that webinar after I said that piece. And then afterwards, somebody messaged me and went, my father passed away, and it's really hard, and I don't know, and people in like, everybody was affected by it in a good way, even though it was a hard emotion, and everybody felt something important. And there was a new level of openness and empathy in the room. And I went, okay, I'm not going to do this just for that. I'm not going to do it manipulatively, but I now know that this is the power of this story, because other people have lost people too, or other people had traumatic events in their younger lives. Everybody has a connection to that place of shame and pain. And that's in fact what connects us as humans, I think, is like, whatever we believe or wherever we live or whatever we do, we're all connected by loss and grief and shame and pain and all these sorts of things. And when you just open the window a little bit, people just really, really stop what they're doing and pay attention and feel something and connect. And if you do it just for that reason alone and just leave the business stuff as secondary, it's worth it. And then you will find, as a byproduct, that good things happen and relationships are built and you can do business with people. But the impetus has to stay in the, I want to share this so other people feel seen, other people feel not alone, other people feel some connection. And that has to be the impetus.
I love that. And we mentioned Podfest already, but this past Podfest, January 2025, we were in a workshop and I was talking about being a great podcast guest and the importance of telling stories on podcasts and all of that. And someone asked me, well, I feel like I don't like feeling vulnerable. I don't like putting myself in that position to like and tell those personal stories. So I only tell the professional stories. I don't touch any of the personal stories. How do I get past that? And that's basically exactly what I said. It's like, well, stop making it about you.
Yeah.
And I say that in like the kindest way I can, but it sounds mean, but it's not about your.
No, you said it that exact same way. You said that's exactly how you said it.
It is, but then I said after that, that I'm trying to say this nicely. It just I
Yeah.
sound like a jerk, but it's not about how you feel telling the story. It's about how someone else feels hearing it. And if you can make somebody feel seen and feel heard and feel like related to because you shared your story, it's not about you anymore.
Yeah. And you only learn that by doing it. You only learn that by going and doing and saying the scary thing or writing the scary thing and hitting publish. You know, you only can experience that and learn it actually in your body, that it was scary, but then you did it, and that you get one or two comments or pieces of feedback or a DM. Like I got a DM once that was so beautiful to receive. And I was like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. Like, really, this is why I'm doing this. I want to make a living, support my family. I want to make more money all the time. There's never enough money, but this is why I'm doing this. It's to connect with people, to share stories, to open up the world, to help people feel more comfortable being vulnerable, because I believe in the ripple effects of that. It's all I know how to do. So this is the contribution I can make to the world. And so that's got to be the main focus. And then the money stuff, you've got to learn how to make money. You've got to learn how to run a business, but it's not the reason to share your story to make money, because then that's when people feel gross about it. When you read that thing that's like, I used to be this, and then I did this, then I met a mentor who showed me that everything is about sales, and I started making, and now I went from this to Mr. fucking, $1 million man. And you just read this, you go, this isn't real. This is not vulnerable. This is you. This is pity porn or pity performance, or it's not real. And so I think most of us have a good bullshit detector for that. And so I would say, don't worry if people think that, as long as you can get in touch with the impetus for yourself. And Larry, for your thing about the everybody has a rehab story, the thing I always try to think about is, what is something that only I can say? And I think about this with everything, not just stories, but also any content I make, anytime I'm on stage. I always try to say something that only I can say, or at least have moments of that. So the question is, what is it about your rehab story that you've never heard anyone else say? That's something maybe weird and unique about it for you. That's a particular thought you had one day on a Tuesday while you were there, like a specific story or moment or feeling that you've never heard anyone say before. And
is it weird that I have the answer to this?
You have the answer?
But what is
I
it?
don't know if it's the answer he's thinking,
What
but
is
I
it?
have my answer for him.
What is it?
I remember you telling me about how when you were at your like lowest, you couldn't drive over bridges.
Oh,
and
that
you
was
had
huge.
you had such anxiety driving over bridges. And in my head, because I turn everything into metaphors and stories and all of that, that felt so huge, because bridges are so metaphorical. It's like going from one place to like another place, and how we connect different like places and times in our lives. And getting past that was like what allowed you to like kind of move forward in your life and in your journey. So in my brain, what Will's saying is your bridge moment.
And I dig the bridge moment, and that's a very real, and I like the metaphor there, because it eventually digressed to where I couldn't drive at all. I could drive in neighborhoods, but I could not get on a highway. I mean, literally, I would have a panic attack, and I would have to pull. I couldn't do it, and so that was definitely a downward spiral. But I'm going to throw a little humor here, because exactly the moment that I was thinking while I was in rehab. I was also such a monster addict, which I still am, that I actually got a nurse fired because she was smuggling monsters in for me.
Oh shit. Well, see, that's beautiful too, because it's real, it's unique, it's funny, it's like a bit embarrassing, but like, still relatable. Are you a fan of John Mulaney, the comedian?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
His post-rehab stuff is amazing. Like
Baby J.
His stories, it's incredible. Yeah, I just like tears in my eyes laughing when he was reading his article with GQ. Have you heard that bit?
Yes.
I don't think I've heard
he
that
was
one.
on coke, and he had an interview with GQ magazine that he doesn't remember, and then he just reads the entire thing out to the audience, and he's
just eating cereal.
Hilarious, and he's ranting about haunted houses, and he's like, and it's just so funny. And as a former cocaine user myself, I related to the like rambling nonsense and the idea that I would do that on a national magazine, And so anyways, like, I think the humor is lovely. And I think also the bridge thing is really beautiful. And I want to make a point too. And this comes from my training as an artist, like a theater artist and a writer and actor. You don't necessarily have to make the metaphor for people. Sara interpreted the metaphor from hearing your bridge story. So let's say you were to make a post about it on LinkedIn or share about it on another podcast as a guest. You don't have to necessarily say the bridge represents crossing. That's Sara's interpretation that she loved and ran with. And that's beautiful. And I see it too. But you don't necessarily have to fill that in for people. You can leave that up to the listener and the audience's imagination. You can just say, I couldn't even drive down highways. I would get a panic attack and pull over. And then we can fill in all those stories and metaphors for ourselves. You just say what happened and what it was like. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people falter when they feel like they have to make the metaphor and they have to come up with a moral and they have to say, so the moral of the story is when I was like drunk at my kid's soccer game is sports are important. You know, it's like, we don't have to do that, you know? And so, but a great metaphor is great. Spelling it out can be nice, but there's power in your story that doesn't necessarily have a pretty bow tied on it. Just the messy,
I love that.
Truth. Yeah.
I love that. We're getting close to where we're going to wrap this up. But before we do that, I noticed that you have a newsletter, you have a school community, and that's SKOOL, Alex Hormozy's platform there. Do you find those to be extremely helpful in building your brand, establishing a community, having communication on a regular basis with your community that you've established? Talk to us just a little bit about building community and how you stay in touch and you engage with that community on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's really important for me. And it's not necessarily the most lucrative part of my work yet. I mean, it might be one day, but for me, I look at it as you were talking about sharing the different modes of yourself. I kind of look at that self as my like most open mode. So in my newsletter and then in my community where we meet twice a week and work together the same, like, I think there's 7 paying members right now. Only, 4, usually sometimes 2 will show up on a given date, but everybody's kind of like, that's where we really get down to some shit and talk about like these things we're talking about here. But that's where I can share more personal stuff and more intimate stuff. And I look at the newsletter kind of the same way. I maybe would get a bit deeper than I would on LinkedIn. And then again, in the community, even deeper. And so I look at that as a safe space almost for myself to share what I really think and what's important to me and to build in public in a way that I can do a bit more freely. And then you get the user feedback. You get your customers going, hey, I really like this. This was really beautiful. This was powerful. Or nobody reads it. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess nobody gives a shit about that. And then you get that like iterative feedback of what do I share? And of course, I do a lot of like frameworks too, or I try to share like practical steps, things you can do to make your speaking business better, things you can do to be better on stage, ways to tell your story better, ways to be more effective on LinkedIn. So I share those practical things. And then I just see what resonates. And I get that constant feedback. So even though it's not newsletters making me no money, the community is not making me like nearly as much as speaking or one-on-one coaching, but it's the testing ground and it's the connection that you can really find out what people need, what they're struggling with, what they want, what they respond to. So I find that's super powerful for building the brand.
I love what you said too with it's like some things people just like don't see or don't respond to at all. And I feel like that's a fear and like that's a hang up a lot of people have about sharing stories and stuff. It's like, well, what if I post this and just like nobody sees it? Yeah. And like that's like scary and embarrassing for some reason. It's like, yeah, well, if no one saw it, then why are you embarrassed? Yeah. Who were you embarrassed in front of? There was no one there.
Yeah, nobody saw it. Exactly.
But the fact that no one saw it is embarrassing for some reason.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what every artist or every person who puts themselves out always fears is like, what if I bare my soul and nobody gives a shit? It's almost worse than getting laughed at in a way. It's like, I worked on this and I poured myself out and nobody cared. But you only get over that by doing it and by realizing, it doesn't matter. And then, and the more reps you put in, the less important it becomes because it becomes such a smaller percentage of your output. So you're just like, I've now made 1,500 LinkedIn posts, whatever it is. Like I've been posting every day for like almost 2 years now. So, I'm over 1,000 posts, I think by now. If I post something and nobody cares, I just go, oh, that's interesting. Why? I wonder why. And I can just sort of look at it a bit more clinically. But if it was among my first 20 posts, I'd be mortified. And I was mortified back then. But I knew this is a long process to build this personal brand. And it's going to be so important for my career later. And I think we all kind of understand that these days, or most of us, is like, and that's what you guys are doing. That's what we're all kind of doing here is saying we need to be visible. We need to be respected. We need to be trusted. We need to be liked if people are going to give us work opportunities and the ones that we want, and if we're going to continue to grow. And so like, that's important enough to get through the sticky, embarrassing stuff at the beginning and just get the reps in.
Well, this has been such a powerful episode. Honestly, it's one of my, and I don't mean to disrespect any of our previous guests, but this was a really fun and engaging episode, I think. So, and I love the fact that you and Sara connected on LinkedIn, because that reinforces some of our prior episodes that we've done recently, talking about the power of LinkedIn and how the evolution of LinkedIn has really changed.
Huge.
And I think it's just amazing. So, is that the best place for people to reach out and contact you?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is where it's the only platform I'm active. I was given a piece of advice last year, which is one platform, one ICP, one offer, 1 year. I loved that. And I was like, I'm sick of half-assing Instagram and YouTube and not getting any result, and TikTok not getting any results. So I was like, fuck those things for a while. I'm just not going to even touch them. And I'm just focusing on LinkedIn, and it's paid huge dividends. I've doubled my followers since I started a couple of years ago. And now it's like, I'm seeing the compounding effects. So Will Greenblatt at LinkedIn is the place to go. Also, my newsletter is The Green Blast, which is a play off my name, Greenblatt. So that's where I post weekly. It's a bit unhinged, and that's the way I am. And so it's the way I like it. And then, my community is called Speaking Heroes, and it's where we basically work on making solopreneurs, coaches, consultants, helping them like add professional speaker to their resume and to their income stream. And so getting all their assets in order. Speaking Heroes on School, SKOOL, is another place to go if you want to check that out.
I personally am thankful that you are active on LinkedIn, because when I did slide into your DMs to completely just fangirl, I stared at that message for so long. Like, what if he gets mad about it? What if he's like offended? Like, I was like just staring at it, just so anxious about like how you would respond to that. Cause I literally said like, super interested in what you're doing right now, but I have burning questions about life with Derek circa 2006. Yeah. And I was waiting for you to be like, well, that is in the past. Like, why are you bringing that up or something, like being all mad about it? Great. So you responded very quickly,
right? Like, be a human being, and I think the right people respond to that. And so, I loved it, and I'm glad that we got to do this.
Super cool. I'm glad you guys got to connect as well. It's always fun to see Sara with that smile just going ear to ear. So it's been amazing. So Will, thank you so very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry.
Hey, everybody. If you found some value, and I don't know how you wouldn't have found some value, there was so much, again, just in-depth insight into Will's history and storytelling and framing your brand. Man, it was just a super, super powerful episode. So if you did find some value, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button so we can continue to bring you these amazing episodes each and every week. And with that, I'm Larry Roberts.
I'm Sara Losi, and we'll talk to you next week.
Did you hear the way her voice crackled?
I did not have a voice right there.
I did not
have a voice right there.
I don't want to say bye.
And I'm Sara Losi, and we will talk to you next week.